Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and today we have part 1 of our One Pattern 3 Ways series. So we are starting off with Vogue 8772 and consequently this is going to be our sew along that is not going to start this Sunday, it'll start next Sunday. I'm doing things a little different though because we're doing this pattern, One Pattern 3 Ways. Typically with my sew-alongs, we start off with the first week is usually, your supplies, and then we do a muslin and fitting and that kind of thing. Now, I don't typically do muslins in my everyday sewing. Sometimes I do for some things. I am more of a wearable muslin type of seamstress. I know for everyone it's different. I just find it a little less wasteful of materials, to be honest, and time. I'm an impatient person. That's just kind of, that's not great, but it is what it is. Anyway, I just know my body really well now and know how to fit myself, and I'm also really comfortable with a lot of the pattern companies. Maybe if I'm using a new pattern company, I'll do a muslin just because I'm not familiar with their block and how it's going to be on my body, especially my upper body is my harder part to fit. But anyway, I do a lot of flat pattern measuring to determine kind of the different things that I need to do. So that's what we're going to do for this one. This first version that I'm making, I've done in a, it's actually a shirting weight denim, a very lightweight, nice drapier. There may be some tinsel in this too. This was in my stash. But that is my recommendation. If you're going to be doing a wearable muslin, especially on like a button-up shirt, do something stable so you can really see any fitting that you're gonna need to make or any fitting issues you may wanna make for your second iteration. If I were to make this in a rayon, which I could do, or a silk, which I'm going to do, it just, the drape, it hangs, it's just a little more difficult to see if you need to raise or lower a dart, or if a sleeve needs to come in more, or, whatever it might be. Length stuff you can kind of gauge, no matter what you make it out of. But there are some things that are just easier to see in a more stable fabric. So that is why I decided to do this first, which is the version, this is the collar version, C maybe? I can't remember which version this is. It's C or D. Anyway, it's the collar with the collar stand. It's a very traditional shirt. So let's talk about the pattern first before we move on. So this is obviously a shirt pattern. It's a button up. It's got a button up placket for all the views. A and B are basically the same. It's just one uses contrasting fabrics with its, with each other. But it's a pussy bow blouse collar on that one. And then you've got your cuffed sleeves. And then you've got your views C and D that have the collar on them with a, you still have, you get the sleeve with the cuff, you get like an elbow length sleeve and a short sleeve, well, maybe a little past elbow, maybe like a 3/4 length sleeve, and then you also have like a short sleeve version, or you could go sleeveless. There's instructions and a little pattern piece for bias binding for the arm, which I always do my own anyway. And then there's the last two versions, you can do it longer. So it's more of a tunic length and it's got a side split on the hip. So those are kind of the pattern. It features 2 bust darts, it features waist darts in the front, it features 2 waist darts in the back, and it also features shoulder darts. So there's not a yoke on this one, which does come with, many button-up shirt patterns, but we're gonna talk about that in another week. And then it has a continuous lap placket. There is, for the sleeve, for the long sleeve with the cuff. Now on this first one, I've actually used a tower placket, but I have talked about both of those, and I'm gonna link both of those videos up here right now. When I did my shirt dress sew along, I showed you how to put in a continuous lap placket, which we'll be doing for the silk shirt for the sew along this time. And I also showed you how to do a tower placket, which is what I did for this one. So if you're interested in following, picking which one you might want to do for your shirt or want to see how both of those are done, I do have tutorials on both of those. And if you're wanting to see past tutorials or sew-alongs and you're having a hard time finding them, if you go to the playlist section on my channel page, on my homepage, there's a playlist part on there. I have a ton of different playlists that I put together for you guys. One is called sew-alongs. You can look at all the past sew-alongs are all under there. And then there's also one called tutorials, where some of the ones that are also sew-alongs I've put in tutorials if they are specific oh my gosh, my brain's not working today very well. If it's a specific technique, that's what I'm trying to say. Whew. Anyway, so this video doesn't get too long. let's go through. I will now switch over and show you, the pattern and the adjustments that I'm gonna make to the pattern before I even cut into anything, just because I just know my body, I know my length lines and all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna talk you through that and show you how I do all of those. It's going to include a full bust adjustment, it's going to include a narrow shoulder adjustment, and then I do shorten the sleeves. I'm leaving the body alone on this, and I am gonna leave the body alone on this. And then we'll come back and I'll show you the finished shirt. Okay, so we're doing things a little differently this go around with the sew along, because I'm actually going to do the fitting video today, clearly. But the sew along will start with the crepe de chine version on Sunday. So there just won't be a fitting pattern work video for that sew along. You can just reference back to this one. Since we're doing this pattern, one pattern 3 ways, as a reminder, it is this V8772. I have all of my pattern pieces out here, except there is a pattern piece for these 2 sleeves that don't have the cuff, that I put back into the pattern. And then there's also a pattern piece for the bias if you're doing the sleeveless version, which I just stuck back in there. But everything else is out here in my size. We are not going to be messing around with this collar. This is the pussy bow piece that I will be doing for the crepe de chine version, and we'll go over that when the sew along begins on Sunday. But we won't be using this one today, and it isn't really needed for fitting. You wouldn't use any of those pieces for fitting anyway. So I'm just going to set that one aside. That's the only one we're not using. Okay, so let's talk fitting. Now, my recommendation, we're not doing a muslin this time around, mostly because I don't use muslins hardly at all when I sew. I kind of know generally what I need to do to a pattern. I know I flat measure it to make, for the most part, most of the adjustments that I need to make the garment wearable. And I'm just more into wearable muslins. I think that it's a little less wasteful. It's still something I can wear. And especially with a shirt, if you're doing like a dress bodice, a lot of times you can get away with, just a little bit of fabric, just, mocking up a bodice. Obviously, if you're doing something that's very involved, like a coat, sometimes it can be beneficial to do a muslin in those cases. But my recommendation for the first time you make this pattern is to use something more stable. So obviously this version is in a shirting weight denim, which is a cotton. And I think there might be some tinsel in mine, but I would recommend that for your first iteration of this shirt, whatever you're doing, to use a more stable fabric, because you'll be able to easily see where you need to make adjustments in future versions if you want to use something more drapey like the crepe de chine we'll be using. So that's my recommendations here, and now I'm going to take you through the process of my how I'm going to do my pattern alterations. And there's a decent amount of alterations I'm going to need to make. So let's go through all of these pattern pieces that we need. Okay, so these are all the patterns that I'm going to be using for my collared shirt. So I've got the cuff. That doesn't need to change. This pattern piece is fine. We can put it aside. I'm actually going to move this tie piece. Don't need that one at all right now. This is the continuous lap for the continuous here at the bottom of the sleeve for the placket, continuous lap placket. For this shirt, I actually think I'm going to do a tower placket, which and I've talked about this in the sew along I did for the shirt dress, they're interchangeable. You can just find any tower placket from any pattern and use it. And so I'll probably just grab the one from the classic shirt because that one works just fine. But I'll be using the continuous lap for my silk one that I'm going to be doing. That's just my preference. On my more stable cottons and stuff, I just prefer to use the tower placket. All right, then we've got our collar or our collar stand or collar band, whatever, and our collar pieces. Neither of those will be changing, so we can put those over to the side. All right, so now we've got our sleeve. I do know, let's see, I want to determine length. So if you fold your cuff piece in half, which will be its finished, and then we're going to subtract the 5/8 seam allowance from that. And let's see, that cuff is going to be 3 inches. Is that right? Yeah. It's like a 3-inch cuff. So we're going to measure our sleeve here. Let's mark our grain line. So these cutting mats are really great. And let me move these bodice pieces aside because it's getting confusing. All right, so our sleeve, I'm matching this up here to that line. Down to that line. So my sleeve is 27 to 50, which is 23 inches minus an inch and a quarter for the seam allowances on in each side. What did I say? 23 minus an inch and a quarter would be 21 3/4 for this, plus the 3-inch finished cuff, which puts me at 24 3/4, which is way too long for me. So I'm gonna take, I like a little bit of ease in the length of my arms when it comes to like a shirt, just to give it a little blouson kind of. My arm length from the top of my shoulder to my wrist, or to the, you know, like right here on my, is 23. It's 22.5 to my actual wrist, and then like 23 here. So I'm going to take, I think I'm just gonna take 1.5 inches off. That's pretty standard. So that's what I'm gonna have to shorten. I hope that made sense doing the math in my head. But we're gonna do that secondary, because right here we have our finished measurements. I'm making the size 14, and I picked this size because it's for a bust 36, and that is my upper bust measurement. And that's where I pick my size, and then we're just going to adjust from there. So this sleeve is 14 inches. Now my arm, I have big upper arms, and they can range anywhere depending on my weight. I actually haven't measured them. I've lost some weight. They're typically between 12.5 inches and 13.5 inches. So I almost always bump my sleeve up to 15. I just like a little bit more ease in my upper arm. I hate when it gets too tight on my upper arm. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a full bicep adjustment, which is, again, a very common one for me. I'm gonna do that first of 1 inch, and then I'm going to add the, or I'll take away the length, because full bicep adjustments typically take some length away. Okay, and you guys have seen me do this a few times, but we are literally just cutting this cross section. So we're cutting from the edge of the pattern to the hinge line, or the seam allowance basically. And then cutting from the center of the pattern also to the hinge line. So the pattern is really only hanging on right at those seam allowance lines that we marked. Okay, once we have everything marked, then you actually don't really need this much paper. So I'm gonna just kind of move this over here. And now everything should just kind of move the way you want it. So I'm just adding 1 inch. I'm not adding in that much. It's too much. Too much. Right there is 1 inch. So once we've got, it's real easy just to tape that down. Someone also asked about my tape, because I iron it. I use, sorry, that's loud, the Scotch Magic tape, which is the green box. It's the matte. It's not like the cellophane tape that's shiny. And I don't normally, I also have a Teflon foot on my iron, but I don't normally have an issue with the tape buckling or, you know, distorting from the heat of the iron. All right, so once we have this taped down, we are going to shorten it 1.5 inches. So I'm going to cut away the excess paper. Put that aside. All right, now our lengthen and shorten line is distorted now. So we want to stay true to our grain line. So if you just want to mark your grain line back in, grain line, and then just draw a new lengthen and shorten line in the same vicinity, but again, see how distorted it is now that we've done that adjustment, which is okay. And then you can true your sides. I usually just kind of, since it's such a little amount when I'm cutting, kind of true as I go. All right, so there is my sleeve piece. So I've added in the full bicep adjustment, which I do quite frequently. Oh, come on. And then shortened it because I've got little bitty short arms. Okay, it's also a good idea sometimes just to take some tape and tape down the edges on the back here so it doesn't get caught on things, because that's super annoying. Just in a few spots. Okay, so our sleeve piece is good, and we'll be sewing this as is. Making my pleat. Again, I'm going to do a tower placket, so we just really need the slash line. Yeah, and everything should be nice and fine there at the top of the sleeve. Okay, so now let's talk about our bodice pieces. Let's do the front first. Normally I would do the back first, but I want to talk you through the front, and then that will determine kind of what we do on the back. All right, so for the front, and again, this is all, I've not made this pattern, so I have no idea, if I'm going to have to do anything extra. I also want to point out this pattern has two length lines. There's like obviously a longer one and then a shorter one. You've got the shirt tail hem here, and then you've got the full, just like a straighter hem. There's just a couple of versions that are longer that have slits. I'm actually going to leave that length on here because I'm going to use that when I make my shacket, my shirt jacket that I do, which will be pattern 3. So we're going to leave that length there, and then when we're cutting out, I'll just use a tracing wheel or whatever to kind of trace there on the hem line that I need. And, make that as we need it. Okay, actually, I am going to bring in my back. I want to measure my side seam really quickly. It's easier to do without a dart there. So I'm just going to measure the length. And that side seam is 15 inches long, which actually is a pretty good, I like that. That usually hits me about mid-hip. So for a button-up shirt, I think we're pretty good on the length, which is nice. Okay, so we don't have to do anything for the length on the bodice. Now, obviously, or the shirt. So obviously, if I get, I make this and I decide, yeah, it's a little bit long, I can obviously take off length later, but I'm going to leave the length for now. All right, so let's talk about the fitting that we know, that I know I usually have to do for my body. Number 1. The thinnest bust for a size 14 is 40 inches. My bust is 39.5 to 40 inches right now. Again, the bust for a 14 is 36 inches, which is my upper bust measurement. So I knew I was going to have to do a full bust adjustment on this no matter what. So now the question is, how much of a full bust adjustment do I want to do? I think for a button-up shirt that 2 inches of ease, especially this isn't an oversized shirt. This is just a nice button up. It can be as tailored as you want depending on if you use the waist darts or not. So I just want to give myself at least 2 inches of ease. I don't think this has obviously given you 4 inches of ease, which sounds like a little excessive for a button-up shirt to me, especially because that might be a base layer in some cases if I wear it under a sweater. So I want to add 2 inches of ease total to the bust, which means I'll be doing a 1-inch full bust adjustment, because that'll give me 1 inch on each side for a total of 2 inches, which will give me a 42-inch finished bust, which is what I'm going for here. Now, Here at the size 14, it's a 35-inch waist, and I'm assuming that is with this dart taken out. So if you leave the dart in, that dart is an inch. So if you take the dart out, it'll be 35 inches. But if you don't take the dart at all, you're going to have a 37-inch waist, which actually seems very nice and comfortable to me for a button-up shirt. Now there's a back dart in the a back waist dart in the back piece as well. So we can kind of talk about whether or not you want to take those or not. Now that's the thing about waist darts. They don't really affect, a bust dart you need for things to like really fit well. Waist darts are really more the style you're going for. So you can just not sew them. It's very easy because they're right in the middle of a garment. So you can either choose to sew them or not. I hardly ever put a front waist dart in, mostly because my stomach, you know, I've talked before, my fluctuating waistline is always in the front. I get, you know, it will like, my stomach will extend a little bit depending on where I am in my autoimmune issues at that time. So I hate putting in waist darts because that can feel very constrictive to me, and I hate things too tight around my waist when I'm like that. So I'm going to probably never sew the front waist dart, but it's up to you on what you want to do. Okay, another thing that I probably need to think about is this bust dart, the way it is now, is I'm most definitely going to be too high, but the dart point is going to drop when I do my full bust adjustment. So what I'm going to do is I really want to make my, I'm going from the size 14 here. So I'm measuring from the middle point of the dart here through the tip of the size 14, and I'm just going to draw a line through there because the dart doesn't end at the apex. The apex is indicated by, well, it's supposed to be indicated by this guy, but I have a feeling that's not the case. So if I look at the size 14 waist dart, and if I go halfway, keeping everything plumb here, in between that size, here, let's just go from point to point of that 14 waist dart, where those two converge is your apex, which is right here. Hopefully you can see that. In fact, let me put some paper under here just to make that easier to see. Okay, so there's my apex, and that's where we're going to be doing all of our work for the full bust adjustment. So what I'm going to do, I've got my line now through the middle of my dart here and through the middle of my dart, my waist dart that I will never sew. And I'm actually just going to go all the way down to the base of the shirt. So another thing to keep in mind is that, oh wait, hold on. I'll finish that thought in a second. And then we want to do a third line from the apex to the armhole. And I always like to go to the notch. It just seems like a good rule of thumb. And then you need to mark in your seam allowance here. Okay, so for this full bust adjustment, you'll obviously be adding width through the whole front of the shirt. So you want to keep that in mind that, you know, I told you it would be, 35 inches. Now we're going to be adding an inch, so it's going to make it 37. And if I don't sew the dart, that will actually, now we're up to 39 inches. So just keep that in mind, that you are adding to the waist, and you can either fix that by not sewing, or by sewing a bigger waist dart, or you can also take in a little bit more at your side seams. So I'm going from the bottom of the pattern up my line here to my apex. And once I hit that apex, I'm continuing to cut up to my armhole, and I'm stopping. Hopefully am I still in? I think I went out of frame there, sorry. I went up through the apex from the bottom of the shirt and stopped at my seam allowance here. So now I'm just going to trim from the edge of the pattern to that hinge point. And then, It's very delicate. I'm going to go from the center of my dart here, from the outside, and cut to the apex here. Leave a hinge. I love doing dart manipulation. It just makes sense. It makes me happy. Alrighty. Okay, so again, I have a grid underneath my paper. So I'm just going to line up this section here. And I'm actually going to put some tape just to keep this level. Now, I'm not going to go past my lengthen and shorten line because I'm actually going to need that to cut there to true up my hem at the bottom. But, oh, I didn't. I should have gone down farther. That's okay. So now I only want to give myself an inch. So let me put my paper. There we go. Makes it easier. And then I'm just giving myself an inch. What is happening here? And then, okay. There we go. Okay, so I just want to give myself an inch. Oh, poop. See, that's why you have to be careful. It's very easy to tear those hinge points. And then they like to move on you. Okay. So once we have everything in place, like so, now we can tape down our arm there. And you can tape down this side. But as you can see, our line is lower on this side than it is on this. So we're gonna have to cut and lower it. So don't tape this side down yet. Do that in just a second. Obviously, I should have scooted this up on my paper, which was a little silly that I didn't do that, but okay. So you are going to notice that our apex of our dart has moved. So it was up here, but now our dart is converging more right here. So our dart has dropped about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch probably, which may or may not be enough. But I am just going to sew it as is, and then once we've made this shirt, I will determine if I want to lower that dart or not. And if I do need to lower it, I will definitely show you guys how I do that. So now we are going to draw a line. Well, let's do this first. We're going to cut right in the middle of that lengthen and shorten line here on the front. And I'm going to draw a line here. Which is where we want that to line up. And I've got a grid under here that I can see. You can draw lines in if you need to. So we have that little gap there. So now I'll tape this down. And I want to tape it down, a lot of tape, on either side here. And then we can tape it down to the hem and then just fill in paper where you need to fill in paper. So there we have it. That is the full bust adjustment. And then when you are sewing this, you just need to realize that, oh, we need to mark in our new dart, don't we? Okay, so here is one dart leg. Let's mark our new apex really quickly. So 1/2 inch, we want to be like right in the middle there. That dart, you can measure if you want, if that makes you feel better about life. That is a 2.5 inches sizable dart. So about 1 1/4 from there through the end is the new center of our dart. And then so this is our new apex. Now we don't want our dart to go all the way to the apex because that's going to be too much. So we're gonna back it off, oh, I don't know, about an inch probably. So here's gonna be my new dart point, and I'm gonna draw from the original legs. And then you can fold your pattern here at the side to true this up. So fold it like you would sew the dart and to true that up. And then the same thing with, you know, if you wanted to keep the waistline the same, you would take a very sizable waist dart. So you would just want to you know, you'd probably bring this down, oh, probably about to here. So you could redraw in your waist dart. And then that would keep your measurement the same if you did, in fact, want to sew your waist dart. And then it's just a matter of truing up your hems. Okay, so there's the full bust adjustment. So I'm also going to need to do a narrow shoulder adjustment, so we will do that next. Okay, so this is what everything looks like on the front. When I'm finished, you know, I've got my, again, I will never sew that waist dart. It's too constrictive to me. Now, another thing, I didn't draw in my hem there. Another thing you can do is you can take in, you know, you can have your waist curve in a little bit more if you wanted to. Maybe you don't want it too drastic, but you could go in like a 1/2 of an inch here if you wanted to, and just give yourself some more waist shaping here at the side seam if you don't want to mess with the waist darts. So, and definitely putting the waist darts in, just give it a much more tailored fit. If you are someone that has a really teeny waist, I think the waist darts look fantastic. So, you know, it's just kind of whatever your body style, what you prefer, that kind of thing. All right, now the next thing I know I'm going to need to do to this pattern is adjust the shoulder. Now, I know that my shoulder is, a button-up shirt's a great example because it comes to the base of your neck and then extends to your shoulder. So, because that's just how a button-up shirt is, you know, it hugs the neck. This shoulder, let's see, this measures at 6 inches. You're going to take away 1.25 inches for your seam allowances on each side. So 5/8 and 5/8 is 1.25 inches, which puts the shoulder finished measurement at 4 3/4. My shoulder measurement from the base of my neck to the edge of my shoulder is 4 inches, which is pretty typical that I have to do a 3/4 inch narrow shoulder adjustment. Also, really quickly, I'm just going to tape my paper down here. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 3/4 inch narrow shoulder adjustment. We'll do it here on the front. And then we're going to go to the back because the back actually has a shoulder dart. And I had some questions about what to do if there was just a shoulder dart. So we will address that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I first want to take my paper. Let me cut it in half. I don't need quite so much. And I'm going to lay it over my arm, and I'm actually going to just trace. I am frame. Yes, I am. Make sure I'm in frame. Trace my armhole. Make sure you put your notch in there. So there's my armhole curve. Then I'm going to go in 3/4 inch here at the shoulder, which is right here. Which is right there. And then I'm just going to take, you can do this on top or below, it doesn't really matter. Here, I'll put it below though, maybe that might be easier for you to see. Okay. Get things off of there though, so that I can pivot things. Okay. So I'm lining up my drawn armhole here at this 3/4 inch in there. I'm going to stick my fingernail down there, and I'm just going to rotate this. Oh, come on. until it meets my side seam right there, which it will right there. So now I'm gonna just draw in my armhole to that point, clip that down, and then make sure you put your notch back, which is right there. And then we can come through here and cut that. Okay. All right. And that's it. Yeah, just a whole new pattern piece. But we want to do this to this pattern because anything else, any of the other hacking that we're going to do, these changes need to be made first. And then once we have a perfected pattern, and we'll talk more about how to, oops, sorry. I just hit my tripod there. We can talk more about how to preserve your patterns. You know, if it's one that you want to use a lot later on in this series. So there we go. There is my front. I've done a 1-inch full bust adjustment, and I've taken in my shoulder, done a 3/4 inch narrow shoulder adjustment. All right, so for the back, now for my back piece here, here's our back. We have a shoulder dart and we have a waist dart. I will very possibly sew my waist dart in the back just because I do like some back shaping, especially in the more tailored pieces. The silk blouse, I will pretty much definitely sew in that waist dart. You know, and once I get this made up in the shirt weight denim, I may find that I want a little bit of shaping there, which is actually something that's very easy to add later on. So even after you've made up the shirt, it's easy to put waist darts in. All right, so we need to take off 3/4 inch here at this armhole. So what I'm gonna do is we're actually gonna do the narrow shoulder adjustment first, and then I'll show you how to deal with that dart. So I'm just gonna draw in, same thing I did on the front, draw in my armhole. Make sure I'm marking my notches. Go in 3/4 inch, which is right here. You can see it better if it's underneath. Okay, so I'm gonna put that there. And then we're just gonna rotate that. We'll put tape, keep everything anchored. All right, so now we're gonna match that up, and then we're just gonna go in here like that. Make sure you put in your new notches. Okay, shoulder darts. Let me get rid of this extra paper really quick. Gonna tape this down really quickly. Again, that just really bothers me when the underneath layers are like flapping around. Then they can accidentally make paper rip and yada yada. Okay, so shoulder darts are typically, sorry that's loud, in the middle of your shoulder. So obviously we have moved, and I measured this earlier, and it's like 2 5/8 to the dart leg, and then it was 3 1/4 from the dart leg to the edge before I took that off. So technically now, let's see what our dart legs are. We are like 2 3/8 and 2 1/4. So this is really in the center of my shoulder, so I really don't need to move mine. But if you have to do a major, you know, narrow shoulder adjustment, you find that your dart is way too far to the edge of your shoulder and you want to move it a little more inside, it's just a matter of moving your darts. So what you would want to do is do a line that is perpendicular. This is cut on the fold, so I can very easily do a line perpendicular to my grain line, right there at the dart point. And let's say I want to move it over, you know, 1/2 inch. I would just be moving this dart point over 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to take my, actually, it might be better. Go ahead and mark in your sewing line, which actually will be taking, oops, where are we here? Hold on. It's got a little bit of a curve to it, but you don't need that little peak for the dart at the moment because we're going to retrue it. Okay, so there's my sewing line. So then it's just a matter of moving my dart legs over then 1/2 inch. So I'll go 1/2 inch here. And then there's the dart leg there. It can get a little confusing. Just make sure that your dart is the same distance, which beforehand it was 3/4 inch wide, and it is still 3/4 inch wide. Then it's just a matter of drawing a new dart. So then you would just draw in a new dart, draw in a new dart, and then you would just want to fold it like as it were sewn, turn it off, or you know, fold it, and then trim here, and that would give you your little ring. Now I'm not going to move mine because I just feel like it's probably fine, but that is what you do if you do a narrow shoulder adjustment and you've got that sleeve dart. Okay, that's it. That's everything I'm going to do to this shirt for my first iteration. So I hope that was helpful and not too lengthy. And yeah, I'll see you guys at the sew along. Okay, so those are the adjustments that I made for this, and the full bust adjustment, I was right, did move my bust dart down enough for my body, and I think it's perfect. There's actually 0 adjustments, fitting adjustments I'm gonna make to this pattern. Everything worked out really, really well. So again, I've used this lightweight shirting denim. I love this color, I just think it's really great. I've been wanting a light blue button-up shirt for my closet, and I think this is gonna get worn a ton. So I made the collar and collar stand. I used just some shirt buttons, actually vintage ones from my stash, but you can find stuff like that. They're plastic. There's nothing special about them. They just happen to be something I picked up from a flea market. I did the Tower placket, and this is the Tower placket pattern piece from the Liesl & Co. classic shirt that I'm consequently wearing right now. Let's see, there is a pleat in the sleeve that I sewed. I did do the hem with bias. I made my own bias tape for this one. So you guys have seen me I like to use neckties a lot of times, thrifted neckties, and I wash that silk and I'll put those in the hems of my shirts. I always think that's kind of a fun thing. But for this one, I just wanted to use I had a ton of I had enough fabric left over to make a whole bunch of bias strips, and I thought this fabric would be perfect for bias because it's a nice neutral color that could go many ways. Okay, what else? Just the basic darted back. Yeah, I just really love how this shirt turned out. Again, it's gonna get a ton of wear. I think the length is perfect on me. I will show you video footage right now of it, just the shirt with everything buttoned up. It fits me really well. I like the length of the sleeve is perfect. So yeah, there's nothing fitting wise that I'm gonna change about this shirt. So this is definitely a more classic fitted tailored shirt. I did sew the back waist darts in this version, but not the front waist darts. I don't think I'll ever sew the front waist darts. I mentioned that in the first part of the video there, but yeah, I doubt I do. It's just not my body type. I just don't like front waist darts in my button-up shirts. Yeah, it's just not, you know, it can get fiddly with the darts, number one, but also my stomach pooches out, and so I don't want the shaping there. But I do like it in the back. I think it does add some nice shaping there in the back. So there you have it. That is shirt 1 of One Pattern 3 Ways. So next week, you're actually going to see the silk version with the bow neckline. So you're gonna be able to, and we'll do a lot of comparisons on, you know, version 1 versus version 2. So you'll actually see the sew along shirt before we actually even start the sew along. And then the sew along will start a week from Sunday for this pattern. So yeah, so you can definitely look back on fitting and kind of the fitting adjustments that I did do on this pattern. But yeah, I just measure and do a lot of flat pattern measurements for when I'm sewing a new pattern, and that's what I did on this, and it worked out perfectly. That's not always the case. Sometimes I do still have to make tweaks, and I was kind of anticipating I might have to make a tweak in the length I may want to change, which I didn't, and sometimes the bust dart has to be lowered a little bit because, you know, with a larger bust, actually this pattern I need to lower the bust dart, it's too high. But anyway, this is a different pattern. So yeah, perfect. Lovely button-up shirt pattern. So yeah, we'll be doing the silk version next week, and I'll actually be doing a hack where I'm gonna be turning the sleeve into more of a balloon sleeve, a much fuller sleeve that will obviously go down into the cuff. And then the third version, I'm gonna draft a yoke for the back of the shirt and put it in a pleat, and we're gonna turn it into more of a shacket, so more of a jacket slash shirt. And I'm gonna be using the lower hemline on that one to make it a little bit longer and a little bit more oversized. And I want a straight hem on that one, and we're gonna be adding pockets. So, and we'll be talking a little bit more about all the different things you could do to this pattern to kind of make it your own. And yeah, just have a really good fitting button-up shirt pattern that you can, you know, turn into whatever you want. Okay, that's all I have for today. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you on Sunday for a refashion tutorial, actually. And then Monday is actually my birthday. I will be 41 on Monday. And then Tuesday, I spent some birthday money and used a birthday coupon with Style Maker Fabrics to purchase some fabric. I'm done for a while now. But I'm showing you that haul on Tuesday. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. I will see you on Sunday and then again on Tuesday. Have a good one.